Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little and this is your daily NeoTA Wrap, where we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective each time, asking ourselves just one question: what happened today? What does it tell us about the coming ones? I do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's archived on YouTube, available to you there. It's on the channel L.A. Little. Last night we were talking about failures across the board on the indexes and some of the sectors. That suggested we try to get a pullback, and that's exactly what they tried to do. But man, getting a pullback in this market is such an impossible task. Composite finishes down, so does the Russell and the NDX, but actually I think the Russell was slightly up today. I think that's slightly wrong. We'll check it here in a second. But we did get positive numbers on the SPX and on the industrials. Elsewhere, gold, silver down, bonds up big. They actually came down quite a bit. They were up 2 full points at one point, 1.5% almost, 1.25 I guess it was. Dollar flipped around, sold off on the retail numbers this morning. It was up early, ended down, and oil got a nice big spike rally out of that. What is going on, right? I mean, every time we look at this, the thing that is most glaring to me is that you just simply can't get this market to stay down. And I don't mean that from a daily standpoint, but any standpoint. I mean, every time it comes down, right, it's just like V-shaped back the other way. Down, V-shaped back up, right? Down, V-shaped back up. It's almost ridiculous in the way it works. But one thing I've noticed on a regular basis now is that we have no volume whatsoever anymore. I mean, and I'm talking about the futures. I look at the ES minis, the NDX. Used to do like 50, 60, 70,000 contracts in the first, 5 minutes on the minis. You're lucky if you get 25 now. I mean, it's almost like trading is cut in half. I don't know where all the volume's going, but it sure as heck ain't out there no more. And it's just a slow grind up or down. And it doesn't have any kind of urgency whatsoever to it anymore. And you can kind of see that in the VIX and some of these other measures. If you look at the VIX, this thing's just like totally got demolished the last week and a half. But even going back, I mean, let's go back to the VIX here. This is on March 2nd. Okay, now you had that big rally in February, and that would make sense for the VIX to go down. But come back and look at it from March 2nd forward, right? This thing has gone from a high of 30 down to almost 21. That's $9 loss on a $30 stock. In the same time, S&P's gone nowhere, right? It's gone up, down, up, and you've got, basically a nowhere at the beginning of March, right? It's gone nowhere. And the VIX has got creamed. The volatility is gone. And, these days of just kind of grind is just grinding that VIX down and grinding the volatility down. So, I'm not sure what to say about all that other than the fact that it's so noticeable. I had to mention it. But, we try to pull back today. We do pull back, but in the end, the S&P ends up slightly higher, and you're up there testing into that bar again. That bar is 2097.43. You close 2095, so it's going to try to get over it again tomorrow. Remember, it got over it, back under it. Now it's going to try to get back over it again, and that's the key bar. If you get over this bar, over the top of this bar, then you go back and test those highs, and you got 2 swing point highs up there. Moving over the NASDAQ, the NDX. So if we look at this guy, it's sort of the same story, not quite the same retrace today as you saw in the S&P. It went up, tested yesterday, failed, came back under it, right? Tries to push down, just doesn't have anything on it. No volume, can't go lower, it just grinds back up a little bit. NDX, test, fails. What does it do? It pulls back just like it should. Russell, but it was the same thing. Couldn't hold it down. Now the Russell, I think, actually ended up today. Yesterday's close was 65.59. No, it was down slightly, so that number was right. it still cannot get over this bar. How many times can you test it, folks? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row now. Testing that, trying to get over it. No volume, pushes down today with a little bit more volume you've seen lately, but still nothing there, right? And if I look at the weekly on this thing is basically ground to a halt, right? It can't go anywhere, it's just hanging. So index wise, you know, today they should have pulled back. They tried to pull back, ended up mixed. What else is different? It's the same thing we've seen over and over again. Same story. No sellers on the way down and practically no buyers on the way up. So same sort of story. We're going to come back. I'm going to spend a little time tonight looking at some earnings. I said I was going to do that last night and I didn't. I'm going to look at them tonight because, you know, tonight we actually have Monday and Tuesday, in particular today's earnings to look at. We got a piece on oil tonight because we've got a subscriber, viewer asking about oil, so we'll spend a little time on it, and I'll be right back and tackle those for you.
Learn how to trade with the Trade with LA service provided to you by TA Today. This service includes daily portfolio and comments that are emailed to you before the market opens each morning. We provide a daily view of the markets and a model portfolio you can follow even if you work another job. Every weekend, LA records his weekend broadcasts that gives you a synopsis of the week and a prognosis of coming weeks. You will also have access to our Teach and Trade room, where LA provides day trades and teaches neoclassical concepts throughout the trading day. To get started, go to our homepage and click Trade with LA.
So as we come back here, I want to focus on earnings to start with. Yesterday, Commerce Bank shares, nice big spike up volume, leaves volume at the top. That's a good sign. But it couldn't hold it yesterday. Falls back in. It's in that range still. So really kind of a fake out, breakout type situation. Gets over a swing point high but can't hold. But it tests with volume, so it probably will grind its way back up there if the market allows it. This morning, Ozark, I think it was this morning. Yeah, it was Ozark this morning. They came out with earnings, got over 2 swing point highs. I've liked this stock for a long time. You know, I talked about it on a radio show probably 3 years ago. You know, it's a great stock, and it's just grinding its way higher, and there's really nothing wrong to say about it. The big names today in the banking sector were JP Morgan. JP Morgan came out, and they actually had you know, some pretty good earnings, and they, you know, the story that we're hearing here on the financials is you got margin pressure on the loan side of the business, but JP Morgan made it on the trading side of the business. That high was 62.87 before, closes at 63.04, has volume, so it gets over it. I'll be very curious tomorrow to see the follow through. In other words, can this push up or not? You ended up with a doji right after a you know, a nice big spike up. You couldn't really hold that well. In other words, this thing didn't just like take off. So it had good volume, right? Good spike up, gets over the highs, right? Looks like it wants to try to grind higher. That high out there, 63.49. You got the 63.61, so you're over it, back under it. No volume on it. So, you know, this is a good story if the financials can actually do something with it. So you got an ABCD structure, but what we've seen so far in all these cases is neither side can do anything with the projections that are handed to them. Each time they simply lose and come back in. Wells Fargo was the opposite. They actually had bad earnings, tried to sell off but couldn't, and so they pushed down with volume, but yet they come back, close about you know, even, not down that much. What is it, 0.75%? Just hanging there. That's, you know, at best it's a sideways move. So that was the two big bank stocks today. Over in the trucking sector, JB Hunt gets a breakout. That one has been looking good, continues to look good. It's got an ABCD up. That trucking sector is probably not a bad place to be looking. And then if you go over to the rails, after the bell, CSX reports. Now, we had gotten a warning yesterday out of Norfolk Southern. CSX opens lower as a result of that. Big volume, right? Spikes back up. Today, after the bell, closes up about 2% more. So it traded up to about 34 or so, but that's really not taking it anywhere. This one would be lucky to get over about 35, it looks like. That's the swing point high it's going to shoot for. Let's look at it over here on the weekly. Yeah, there's just not a lot here, but you know, it's not in bad shape. It's just doesn't look like it's going to go that far. So CSX, so the rail's doing okay. The trucker's really doing pretty well. Another one this morning was Fastnell, and they got a nice big spike up. And they've been grinding lower. Let's look at the weekly. Yeah, that doesn't look like that's going anywhere either, so that's, you know, neither here nor there. Let's go over Johnson & Johnson was another name today. Johnson & Johnson really couldn't get anything going. They closed down slightly, and you got a big volume low out there still, and this is just a huge range trade. So the range trade, you know, you kind of got two pieces. You got the top half, the bottom half, and this thing is just kind of hung in the middle here. Can't get over it. So really nothing doing there. And then after the bell, Intel was the other big name today. Now Intel, if you remember, let's go to the weekly. Intel had sold off. They did an Altera, tried to do a takeover on Altera. Got a big push up off of that, but couldn't go anywhere. Intel spiked up after the bell, was up about 1.5%, but this stock's going nowhere either. And the thing about Intel is Intel came out and they talked about the CapEx business going to be cut. I'm very curious to watch like Applied Material and some of these others tomorrow to see how they react. So when I look at the earnings, they weren't horrible, you know, compared to the horribleness already expected. And so from that perspective, they're okay. But, you know, other than, you know, maybe JP Morgan, and actually JB Hunt was good. I don't see anything that special about what was out here today. It's going to take more than that to actually get this market probably moving to the top side. But it's hanging there. It won't give it up, folks. And the big reason it won't give it up is it really has to do with the overseas markets. And when we come right back, we'll pop over to those. Also, the oil markets, we'll look at that as well. I got some viewer questions in those areas. I'll be right back. So one of the questions out here continues to be, you know, how long can we hang, right? And I've been proposing to you lately is that the reason our market is hanging like it is because the world markets are so strong. Here's the CAX. The CAX goes over, back under. I don't have the volumes on it yet, but it looks to me like actually it didn't go over and back under. It's just a pullback. So, you know, at best, maybe this thing comes back to a retest regen. And that would be bullish if it did, right? You actually need to come back at some point. You can't just keep going up forever, right? And this is up, what, 1,000 points now in roughly 3 months. So, you know, come on, give me a break. You know, at some point you got to say, okay, that's pretty good, right? 20%, 3 months. Yeah, might need to take a little break somewhere. So I'll pull back into here. That would give it an opportunity to actually do something. But right now, you know, it's just not giving anything up. And if I look at the DAX actually broke out on Friday. DAX is coming back immediately for retest regen. That top was 122.219. It got into it, back over it. Again, I don't have the volumes today, so I don't know what it looks like. But unless the volume was heavy today, and I don't believe it was, then that looks like a good retest and potentially a regenerate back up. So those two still looking fine. If I look over at the China markets, these guys are doing inside bars. Now they had gotten over with less volume, and now they do an inside bar. This looks like a classic, I'm going to come back some. And, you know, I don't know if it's going to do it because right now it's a feeding frenzy over there. But this is not something you pour a bunch of money into at this point. You're doing inside bars, less volume, right, after you get over the previous spike with less volume. So let me try to point out what I'm really saying. Look at this top and look at this top. And that's the one that's over it. The one that's over it has less volume, right? Excuse me, it's this bar that got over it. Has less volume. So you go over it, you stay over it, but you have less volume. And then what do? You do an inside day, and you test that prior high volume day, and you can't get over it again. That's begging for a pullback. That's what that's telling you. And so China, to me, looks like it's going to give you some sort of pullback fairly soon here. That's the way those guys are set up. And they've been a frenzy, right? They've been up 8-10% in a week. You know, you can get 2 or 3% back and it means nothing. So, you know, from that perspective, I'm not really, you know, I'm not seeing anything here that makes me want to, you know, go off and trade into China and trade into it very large. And switching to the other viewer question here, it has to do with oil and the oil stocks. And, you know, the viewer says, you know, OIH, XLE, they look like V recoveries. I've mentioned this before. Is it the market's belief that we finally have a bottom in oil? Well, maybe. You know, I would hedge because you actually have a high volume low on the daily. So I don't know that we have a bottom in yet. But you do have an ABCD structure up, right? That measures up a little bit higher, didn't quite get there. It's going to try to get there this time. And potentially, you know, it could get all the way back up to here. You know, a little bit of an overshoot. And you actually have that on the ABCD nested, right, to get up to there. So oil's definitely trying to push up. Oil stocks. Okay, so, you know, if oil's pushing up, are the oil stocks going to do a V-shaped recovery? Here's the high. You're attacking it today. And I'm on the OIH. These are the drillers. 8.8. You go into 9.5. Right? Top was 36.90. You get to 37.03. You close at 36.85. You do less volume. That's a failure on price and on volume. That should pull back. Now, it hit it with almost as much volume, so I suspect it's going to try to continue to bang on it again tomorrow. If I look at it on the weekly, okay, on the weekly it's set up interesting because you actually have two swing point highs together. So this is set up that this could get a nice spike if it gets over this level. This is a key level. So, you know, they're set up nicely. You've got some serious, here, let me pull this out so you can see this. This bar and this bar, that little overlap in between them, right? That's the key area. So you may break these two swing point highs, come into there and just get hammered right back down because you're certainly not coming up with the volume that you had at these bars. So that to me is the two bars, that's the zone. So if I draw it out for you, the zone is right here and it's a little overlap zone. It's about like that. Goes up to about 30.50. You got to clear that to really get something going. So yeah, maybe it is, but right now, you know, the jury's still out. I don't know that it's you know, it's a V-shaped bottom. Yeah, sure, it's got a V to it, and if this thing does break out, right, you definitely could get a decent move off of it into this prior swing point low. But actually, it wasn't a swing point low, but this prior low where the resistance is. But right now, folks, we're not there, and you know, you got to get over it, and you got to get over this bar here. So I would say, you know, if I see that, then yeah, I can get the rest of the move up into this area, and maybe it's worth playing it. You can trade these, you know, these stocks are tradable. I traded them profitably all the way down. I was trading ExxonMobil almost exclusively and some of the refineries. It's not that you can't trade them. The question I believe that's being asked is this a bottom? Is the bottom in? Right? Is this it? And if I go over and pull over the monthly chart, right, this doesn't look like, you know, it doesn't look like a bottom quite yet. It's close. Maybe it is. But it's just, you know, it's going to take a little while to know. It's on a monthly basis. It's got under it, back over it. It's holding. Doesn't look too bad. Maybe it's the bottom. Maybe it's a huge range about to play out in a larger way. Can you play that? Can you trade that range? Sure. I mean, you can make that trade and see if it works. I don't know if it will or not. It's not a bad setup. I would just want a little bit more information before I went through my money in it, though. Right? And I'm talking about money I'm going to leave in there for a little while. You know, probably the safest thing to do is if these start to break out, you trade with them and see if they can get over it or not. And that gives you about a 20-30% cushion on the way up. If they don't get over it, well, then you give it up and you wait and you try again. Let's look at the XLE. So this one's doing the same sort of thing. Let's look at the weekly. And this one's not set up as clean. This one actually has a different setup. It's off the same bars. And this one is like that. So it's coming back into that bar now. It's doing the same sort of thing. They have small ABCD structures in place. Actually, they're tiny, right? It's this versus this, which would take you just right to there. So I just, I've been asked this by multiple people multiple times. Bottoms take a long time, most of the time, right? I mean, they can be V-shaped, but they're going to get retest and retest. You had the first test here. That was a good one on the XLE. Now you had the higher low. Yeah, this could be a spike up and take you higher, but you're messing with a commodity that there's an abundance of supply, and I'm moving back to the commodity piece of this. If that commodity trades lower, these stocks are going to have a hard time going higher. And so it really comes down to what that commodity is going to do. And when I look at this commodity and I look at the oversupply of it, just as I look at the oversupply of euros or the oversupply of yen because of QE, that doesn't make me all that excited to jump on the other side of that trade and buy it. So, I'm hesitant because of that, because I don't know that you really have a bottom in here yet. So you can play it. I would just be very careful with it. And I'm not trying to do anything with it as of yet. And if I were, I'd probably be picking an individual stock. Let me look at what some of these look like. I haven't looked at them. So ExxonMobil, yeah, that's back in doing a retest regen off the low, this low, right? Let's look at CVX. These are the big XLEs. CVX looks a lot better. It's got a high volume low and pushing up pretty good. Going to try to get to the gap area. Let's look at another one or two. Halliburton. Now Halliburton's got a nice move up, and on a weekly, HAL, yeah, so that one looks a little bit better, coming back into that low. So some of them look okay. I would pick out the strongest ones, and I'd be trading those versus trading the whole sector, most likely. Of course, the difficulty there is earnings are up in about 2 weeks, so it's kind of hard to do much in front of them. Okay, I'll come back here with the final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. Be right back. One of the things I've said repeatedly is that I can't get too excited about this market. I feel like I'm on the fence. I'm a Humpty Dumpty right now. I got no place to fall. And if I do fall, I'm not sure somebody can put me back together. This market had a little ABCD structure, and it's pretty much finished it, right? You go over, you test. I'm on the NASDAQ. You come back, you can't trade down. You almost get back into here. Now you're going to try to trade back up again. Folks, this is the bar. It's the bar that's the same on all of them. It's the same on the sectors. It's the same on the indexes in most cases. March 26th in this case. You got to get over the breakdown bar. If you get over it, you can go take out some more highs, right? But until you get over it, it doesn't mean a thing. The catalyst is the world markets, the earnings, and to somewhat Fed speakers, and there's plenty of those guys yapping their mouths again the rest of this week, and economics itself. One thing I continue to see here domestically is that all good news is, all news is not good news anymore. It used to be, it doesn't matter if it's bad or good, market's going to go up, right? They don't give a flip. If it's bad, Fed's going to keep easing. If it's good, then the Fed's going to keep easing and it's getting better. And that's kind of what you're seeing in Europe and Asia now. Doesn't matter if it's good news, bad news, it's all good news. At some point, that doesn't work anymore. But right now, it works over there. Asia does look like it's going to try and pull back some tonight. If we get pullbacks on the world markets, that support that's supporting our domestic markets at least temporarily leaves. That leaves this market up to do what it wants to do on its own. And what it wants to do on its own, in my opinion, is pull back. It can't pull back with the rest of the world going up though. And so it would be a temporary pullback, but that's what it kind of wants to do. But it needs the rest of the world to do it. And right now it's not. Or if it's really going to go higher, you need something to drive it. What's out there? It's earnings. The earnings are known to be bad, right? Today's earnings, they weren't great by any means, but even the bad earnings were better than expected, right? That's what the street does. It sets the bar so low that all you got to do is like trip over it. So right now, they're just quote unquote better than expected. If we get some, big mammoth earnings out there, it'd be a different story. But if we don't get that, and if the world markets don't give us anything, then you're going to see this market roll right back over and do the same thing it's going to be doing or has been doing, and that's going to be a roller coaster move right up and down. So that's kind of where we're at. Maybe we're going to get that catalyst, maybe not. Right now, I don't see it. I don't see the earnings doing it. But we've only got one day under our belt, so let's give it a chance and see what it can do. We got Intel tomorrow. We'll see how it trades, how the chips in general trade. Another one tonight actually was LLTC. Let's see how that one's set up. And that one's not set up too well either. So we'll see how this one trades tomorrow too. It was up about 1% after hours. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. My take here is it's going to be a tough market. I just don't see the catalyst here. And right now, technically, this thing can roll just as easy as it can, try to grind higher. See you tomorrow. Take care. Good night.